Welcome to the Freebirth podcast, a supportive space for people who are learning, exploring, and celebrating their autonomous choices in childbirth. Together, we'll unpack truths, share personal stories, and claim our ability to birth freely and intuitively. Here's your host, Emily Saldea.
We're doing a 4-part series over the next year with my friend Kim in Los Angeles, journeying with her from her birth work to leaving the system altogether into conscious conception to now having a wild and autonomous pregnancy, and then finally her upcoming free birth. This episode is meeting with Kim at the end of her first trimester, wrapping up her journey thus far. Let's go ahead and just start with saying that we are joined today. I am joined today with one of my dear friends, Kim from Los Angeles, and she is at this time of the recording 12 weeks?
Mm-hmm. End of 12 weeks, yeah.
And she is still feeling quite nauseous and dealing with all of that fun first trimester stuff. Hopefully it's just first trimester. So you're going to hear some crackling of the saltine paper. And what other snacks do you have with you?
I have some mango and a bagel and ginger ale and water.
You're like, and a lasagna and a salad. If only.
And I have chicken in the oven.
Nice, yeah. So you might hear some food today to keep her nourished. So just deal with that, please. And yeah, I guess we will just go ahead and welcome all of you listening into what we're doing with these. This is going to be a series. Our goal is 4, and I asked him to do this with me because she is also a birth worker, and I know her from the doula community in Los Angeles, and she helps run our nonprofit in LA together. So she, which she'll speak to in a moment, but she is choosing to have a wild, autonomous pregnancy and went through her own process of conscious conception, and then, her intention is to free birth outside the system. And so I thought it would be really cool to track her pregnancy and her birth and to check in with her at the end of every trimester. So our goal, like I said, is 4. So at the end of the first, second, third, and then 4th trimester, and just kind of see what happens. And so she's willing to include us in her process. And, we've spoken before that we really hope to encourage and normalize anyone else who wants to do this. So yeah, what a better way than to just check in with you and see how it's going. And let's just start there. So welcome, my darling.
Hi.
Kind of take us back and tell us a little bit about who you are and kind of the precursor to where you are today.
Yeah. Lately, as I've been reflecting on how I got to this place and how I arrived to choosing free birth and, being pregnant now and in this choice, I really realized that this has been kind of a whole lifetime journey. I have, starting from, I guess my birth, which was actually, I didn't know this till later, but kind of a traumatic birth, and that my mom, my head was pushed back into my mom's body while she was pushing because her doctor was at a party and wasn't there yet. And I remember as a kid, my mom always saying, you were so ready to come and they weren't ready for you. And just kind of hearing these things. And it was not till many, many years later that I realized what that was and how traumatic that was for my mom. And she didn't even really realize that really until we had a conversation about it where she cried and it was a whole thing. But I think in some ways it's really in my I feel like this has really been what I'm supposed to do in this life, taking back birth and from my own birth and
I have goosebumps
for all women.
Yeah, God, of course, I resonate with that. It's only the biggest thing ever, right? No big deal.
The biggest
just taking back birth.
Yep, huge deal. And so my journey towards motherhood has been, I've always worked with children and babies since I was like 12. I was the one who babysat all the kids. I actually like dropped a baby down the stairs when I was 12. So I've come a long way.
Oh my God.
They were fine. But didn't always start off knowing what to do.
It was a rocky start for Kim.
It was a rocky start. People trusted me with their babies, though. So I've always had an affinity to children and just been back and forth throughout my life of like, I want to be a mother. I don't want to be a mother. I love living my life and I love traveling. And so there was a period of time where it was like, no, this doesn't make sense. I can't fit this in. And then I met
you
people
can't live your life with a baby.
Well,
no, that is the narrative. Everything
Exactly.
stops. Everything's ruined. You'll never enjoy your life. Your freedom is gone. Totally.
So, and a theme for me is that, I'm 32, so I feel like this has been like 32 years of undoing stories and retelling myself narratives. Mm-hmm. So that's an example of one of the narratives I've had to retell myself. I started meeting families who had really cool lives and kids,
right.
And starting to see examples of like, oh, you can keep being a person, and your life doesn't stop.
Well, and that's such a good example of one of the largest narratives in that we are stepping out of, right? So like, yes, free birth is kind of maybe the umbrella, like master mother of what we're stepping out of. But within that, there's so many other systems that we are looking at and narratives that we grew up with. So that kind of American or westernized, like very boxed in, you go to school, you find your partner, you get married, you have a baby, you're locked into a job, or you are a stay-at-home mom if you're a woman, and it looks very certain. And so you better play in your 20s and you better travel because then you're locked in. And of course we know many, people, I totally have done the same work of like, oh wow, this is actually a certain narrative or system that you can actually just step outside of, and it doesn't have to apply to us.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be the way that you choose to live your life. And that was one of the many conversations my husband and I, when we first really started having these conversations about wanting to conceive. One of them being like, oh, well, we can still travel, of like, dreaming about things like someday we want to take a year where we travel around the world with our kids because we've never traveled around the world before, and we can still do that with our kids, and that's so much more beautiful to be able to show them that. So anyways, I feel like my path has really been, a winding one of figuring out who I am and what I want and finding the right partner. The previous partner that I was with, I cared about so deeply. It was a very intense relationship, but very fast. And I remember going to a psychic and I guess asking like, am I supposed to have kids? I just had this sense of like, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out, do I really want to be a mother? And you probably remember, I think this was maybe, I don't know, I'm sure you remember me saying I went through a phase of like, I'm never being a mother and I don't want to have kids. Mm-hmm. So this was in that time. And the truth was I didn't want to have kids with that partner. Right. And I knew that if I stayed with them, that wasn't our path. Mm-hmm. And I think that it would have been fine if that's the path I went down, but it wasn't the right relationship. But anyways, I remember him telling me something like, well, like there are these different paths, which is true. There's one where you'll be with this partner and you won't have kids and you'll have this life and you'll be happy with that. Or there's another path, another person, and he said who you already know, and I ended up marrying one of my best friends, and said there are children in that path and you'll be happy with that. And he said something like, I wouldn't tell this to every person, but with you are going to be satisfied with your life, whether or not you choose to have children. And there was a great piece in that, in getting that answer for me, where it was like, and again, it's like this narrative that you're told, like, if you don't have kids, you're going to regret it. Or if you do have kids, this
right. You're fucked either way is basically how we are raised.
Yeah. And so that was just a moment that I reflected on in this journey where I realized, like, you know what, no matter what I decide, I am going to be fulfilled with my life and I'm going to commit to that path.
Well, and I think it's so important to, I mean, this is the work. This is the work of being alive, that fulfillment or happiness or peace, it doesn't come from this outside thing, including children. And so it doesn't come from traveling the world for a year or having the perfect husband or having your 3 kids and the perfect family or whatever, all of these like things that, you know, I think it's just so important to really like stop there for a second and remember that, and to, you know, like take a breath there for anyone that's listening that maybe you're wanting children or you're pregnant now, or you're not sure if you want kids or not. And I love that. I love that someone reflected back to you, you know, your truth that you can be fulfilled and happy in whatever path happens, because there are so many things that are out of our control or that we just can't know, and we shouldn't be waiting. Not that you were, but just that we shouldn't be waiting for something to fulfill us.
And it really, there had to be, you know, a lot of this is coming down to this whole process I also went through in learning how to love myself and how to be, you know, just really finding my true self and feeling connected to myself before I could go down any of these roads. I have a pretty complex history with mental illness, with anxiety and depression, that I suffered for many years, and postpartum, sorry, my brain, not postpartum, post-traumatic stress disorder, from being sexually assaulted as a teenager, or from being raped. And, there was this whole huge healing process that I think very much is a process or a part of my conscious conception that I had to go through and go, you know, over these mountains before I could trust my body enough to be in the place that I am now. And I think, I'm really grateful that I went down those roads. I don't think I knew that it was going to ultimately take me to free birth, but I think without all of that, I don't know that I would be here.
But this is conscious conception, like taking, to me anyway, and to you, like taking that time to face those, you know, or go over those mountains and do your work and take the time, you know, to, you know, find the right partner for you, and all of the time, the slowness that evolves into is so. It's so potent, and it lends itself to have a really, really ecstatic and joyful and peaceful experience, you know. Not that physically, I mean, it sounds very challenging, which we'll get into later. You know, the beginning of your pregnancy sounds like it's really been quite the rough ride, but in your heart and in your spirit, you know, I know you obviously in real life, so I know that this baby was very wanted, and just how profound that you didn't have to go through what, you know, unfortunately so many women go through with an unexpected pregnancy, which is like, oh my God, you know, and it's not that we would go through a different, oh my God, but with a wanted, you know, intentional, you know, consciously conceived child, there's so much work that goes into it beforehand that inarguably lends itself to more peace. It's beautiful. So speak to that a little bit more. And then I also want to make sure we do talk about your birth work, because that obviously is so interwoven into this, and has gone on for longer than you've been with your partner. Either way, however you want to take it.
So actually I feel like a lot of the work in accepting my body and healing the trauma that my body went through. Because I remember when I was first sort of really dealing with being raped, which I didn't deal with it until about 10 years after it happened, because I was drugged. And so it was not a conscious memory ever. But it was very much a physical memory, and it was in my body and lived in my body, because everything that happens to us is in our body and in our cells, especially traumatic events like that. And so around the time, actually, after I went to my first birth, so, sorry, this is a winding path story. So I ended up getting into birth work about 4.5 years ago, through yoga, really. I became a yoga teacher during the time of a lot of the darkness and that I was feeling. Yoga was one of the things that made me feel better. So I kind of got, as a lot of yoga teachers get, like really obsessed with it for a little while, and then decided, like, I need to make this my life. I'm going to be a yoga teacher. I'm going to teach yoga all the time. And, I want to share this because it really did. That was one of the things that did bring me a lot of peace, or at least I have a teacher who said that yoga is like a magnifying glass. The practice of yoga, it magnifies everything in your life, the good and the bad. Mm-hmm. And I always think about that because it was another way that I was able to suss out, like, this is the stuff I don't need anymore. This is what I'm letting go of. This is what I do need. This is what's true to me. So I'm going through all that. I kind of fall into birth work because I started teaching prenatal yoga just because I think someone asked me to sub a class, and I was like, sure.
Cute.
I'll sub a prenatal. I don't really remember. And then apparently I was really good at it because the moms loved me. And I guess there was like really positive feedback, and someone said like, hey, you should teach prenatal yoga. So I took a training and just totally fell into that. And I had heard the term doula before, but I was kind of learned more about what that was in my prenatal yoga training. And while I was doing that, I thought like, this seems cool. It kind of started as a business decision because I was like, oh, if I become a doula and I'm a prenatal yoga teacher, like I can get more clients. And so I had that seed was a little bit planted. At the time, I also started to nanny for a woman who was a birth doula, who was finishing up getting out of the game because she just had her second child. And I sort of unknowingly was her postpartum doula. I didn't really realize that's what I was doing, but it's totally what I was doing. I just was around her while she was nursing, and we talked a lot about a lot of things, and she taught me a lot. So during that time, I'm teaching prenatal yoga and other kinds of yoga. She had her baby. We had a really very intense connection. We've definitely like lived lives together. And I remember there was a day where someone brought a placenta over. She did placenta encapsulation, and I was just hanging with her and her kids, and she was like, hey, do you want to see this placenta? And I was like, yeah, totally, like super interested. And I hadn't been to any births yet, and I hadn't started my doula training yet, but I was reading birth books that she was letting me borrow, and I was getting really interested. And I remember like I put on gloves and she takes it out, and I'm just like touching it and so interested and enthralled. I thought it was just like the most beautiful thing I'd seen, and asking her a bunch of questions. And she was like, I really think you should get into birth work. And she was like, not many people get excited about placentas and touching them. And I think that, this might be a path for you. And so we worked out a deal where she paid for me to do my training, and I sort of paid it off by helping her with placenta encapsulation. She taught me how to do it. She did tub rentals, so I would like clean the birth tubs and drop them off to people. I was just kind of doing the stuff that she didn't want to do because she had a 3-month-old, and helping her out, and it was a nice arrangement. So we did that, and then I was teaching prenatal yoga, and there was a woman. This was in the summer, like 4 years ago, who just like one day after a class, I guess I mentioned that I was learning to become a doula, and a woman just showed up and was like, hey, or after the class, she came up to me and said, this might seem really weird, but I know you want to become a doula and you probably should go to a birth, and I really like you, and I'm having a home birth, and if you want to come to my birth, I'd love to have you there.
That's so
sweet. And I was
sweet.
like, well, okay. Like really amazed. I didn't know her well. I was really touched that she just out of nowhere was like, hey, you want to come to this super intimate thing in my life? So I went to her birth, and she had a doula, but her doula was actually pregnant at the time, like 7 weeks pregnant and feeling not great. So I kind of ended up being the main doula. This was my very first birth. So, just a part of me was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just showing up. And, but it was, because it was a home birth, I feel like that was the perfect first birth.
Right.
But,
for sure. Mine were too.
Because it was, I just followed her lead. Like I just followed her around.
You don't have to know anything.
No, you just like, she'd go in the bathroom, and I'd be like, if it seemed like she wanted me to go in the bathroom, I'd go in with her. And it was actually the 4th of July, which was really cool because there were fireworks happening. Like there was a moment we were like outside and there was fireworks, and I was like, do you want to go inside? And she liked it. She was kind of into it. She was like contracting, and there's fireworks. And I was just like, so again, just enthralled and engaged, like seeing that placenta, just being like, wow, this is amazing. I don't even really know what's happening, but I'm just like in it and watching her. And she just was so beautiful and just doing her thing. And, and her midwife was pretty awesome. I mean, it was actually one of the most hands-off births I've ever seen.
Whoa.
Which is very lucky for
my first
birth.
was one of the most hands-off I ever saw too. Maybe that's why it all happened like that, like to give us a taste of what it could be like.
Exactly. And that's what I've told a lot of newer doulas that I've sort of mentored over time that as I've helped them process their first births that were always traumatic or almost always, or had, intense elements that they were just like, whoa, I didn't expect that. And I, just to sort of honor their process and be like, yeah, I know that's really hard. And like, to be honest, if my first birth hadn't been what it had, I don't think I would have stuck around with this work. Because it after that got really, really hard, know? And so exactly what you said. I think that because I knew what birth could be, because I saw it before I knew really anything else about birth, just with these fresh eyes, and to get to witness that, and it was just like a regular birth, and you
saw a
awesome.
Real unsabotaged, beautiful, magical birth. Yeah,
and the baby came. I forget what's the presentation, with her hand presentation. She had her hand like in her face, and no one it was like whatever, just like stretched her a little bit more. But I don't think she even tore actually, but it was just so calm and just birth. And I'll never forget the high from that, like coming home, and I was with a different partner at the time, someone I had been with, or I ended up being with for 4 years, and thought would be a person I would have kids. We were very back and forth. But anyways, I remember coming home and I wanted to wake him up, and I wanted to be like, oh my God, like the miracle of life. This was just,
you're like, I don't know why I'm horny, but I am. And I seem to like tell everybody.
It was like the most amazing thing. There are no words to describe the way I felt. But it was 3 a.m. and like, I don't know. I think I tried to wake him up, and he didn't want to wake. He was drunk, probably. It was the 4th of July. So, he'd been at a party, and I was just like, couldn't sleep. And, it just completely changed. I think like that was definitely a life-changing, time to see that. It was just so beautiful. And so then that happened, and then, months went by, and I didn't go to any other births, or not because I didn't want to. It's very fuzzy, but around that time in those months is when I started to really get flashbacks of my rape, when I was raped, and things got pretty dark for a while. And I was supposed to go to birth and ended up not. And a few things happened where basically I didn't go to births, and in retrospect, it's really good that I didn't, because I was incredibly vulnerable at that time, and just like crying all the time. There was a period of like a month where I was just crying like every day. And my body was like reliving the trauma as I started to put the puzzle pieces together in therapy of like what happened. And
the last thing you want is to go to a hospital and see what they're doing to women there. Yeah.
Exactly. So it was really great that in the end that I had a few months where, well, really almost a year, I think. I don't know. It was a while before I went to another birth. And so then I'm going through this whole like healing process, which was very intense and involved a lot of different elements. Sort of what I was speaking to before, these overlapped. Then I get a little stronger, and I start attending births. And once I started really like, okay, I'm a doula, I got my business name, the Yogi Doula. I'm teaching prenatal yoga. Once the word was out, I just started getting so many clients, because my yoga students, they liked me, they trusted me, they already felt comfortable with my energy, or whatever it was for them, connected to me. So I started just dove in and was doing, several births a month. And at first it was crazy. I started seeing all kinds of insane things that I did not understand what I was seeing, and I didn't really have that many mentors at the time. And this was before I'd met you. And I really wished that I had met you sooner, or a few other people who ended up being really important in my life as just friends and mentors, because I really had no idea.
Well, and you
And
don't
so-
know, like, I mean, I remember when I first, for years, the shit that I saw happen at the hospital, I remember not questioning it.
Yeah.
Even though now, like, some of those memories are burned into my heart and my mind, and they're horrific. But
Yeah.
in the beginning, and probably in large part because of our training, right? The training
Yeah.
is so like, this could happen. Here's a vacuum extractor. Here's a episiotomy
Exactly.
scissors. Like, this is all perfectly fucking normal.
Yeah,
so
and
I
after
didn't even
seeing
know
a
to
home birth,
question
where
it.
I was like, I kind of was like, but why was that birth so different?
Right.
And I think I did have some questions about it, but then I thought, well, like, this is what birth is, like, more
and
births are.
not just what birth is, but this is what doulas do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Because, like, our
You
place
just follow
in
along.
That's where I think I didn't question it for so long. Was like, not that I thought that those births were great or anything, but I was just like, well, this is just my job. I just go to hospital births, and I prefer home births. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. It just became like, it's your job. It's what you do. And in the training, there is so much stress about, like, not judging women's birth decisions. And it just took me a really long time before I realized that women didn't actually, they weren't actually making their own decisions, and so I was looking at it as like, oh, that's just the decisions that, they're making
Mm-hmm. I think this is really important, because I know a lot of doulas listen to this podcast, and I don't think that we're unique at all in navigating this and in feeling confused about it. There's just so much implied complacency and submissiveness, and then this very misogynistic thing that I think got planted in so many of us around, like, our job is just to help reframe the birth. I've talked to so many women who have had traumatic births, and who actually felt very hurt by their doula attempting to reframe or to focus on the positives, because obviously, imagine if someone tried to do that with your, assault. I mean, that would be, and why is that, like, ludicrous? Of course, no one would try to reframe your rape. That's not, I don't think. I mean, that's not nearly as normal as what people do to birth rape. It's wild.
Yeah, and it was definitely, there was a process later in my birth work that I had to go through to kind of, forgive myself in a way of all the times I did that, because I did. And again, it was very unknowing, and it's really painful.
Yeah.
Some of those memories, like you said, burned, and, I have that too, of just feeling so helpless and watching, women be cut without being told they can, or just things happening. And again, you just feel like, well, this is just what's happening. And I'm like silent, and
or we're like holding their hand.
Or
I mean,
their hand
some
and
of
telling them they're okay.
It's so painful. I have so many memories of that, of like the doctor looking to me as as I'm the one that
like,
is supposed to keep this hysterical bitch calm while they're pulling a baby out of her or holding her down with a team of people. And I just did it. And I just would hold her hand and look in her eyes and say, it's going to be okay. And, see these women leave their bodies. And, oh my God, it took, and it's like crazy that it took so long. I mean, I've done this for a long time, and it really took many years. So actually, I want to go to that for a second, where I'm curious about where this for you, especially with such serious history of trauma and violence happening to you, and then also so actively working on that. And then, so like, when did you start to kind of piece these pieces together that you were actually witnessing rape, abuse, violence, etc.?
Yeah. I think it really wasn't. So I try to think about, like, was there a moment? And it really was just, it was a slow process. It was a combination of finding other doulas. Like, meeting you was a really big, I think, part of my journey, because I remember I remember the first time, I don't know if you remember this, the first time we ever met several years ago, we had like, it was because of Miri, because
Kitchen
you were her
Mouse.
doula. Yeah, Kitchen
Yeah, of
Mouse.
course I remember.
And well, I feel like it was so long ago, but I don't know, it was a few years ago. But I just remember, I don't even remember exactly what we talked about, but I feel like there were just things that we were just chatting. Like it was just because we're like,
Like
oh,
a
we're
doula
both doulas,
date.
we should
Totally.
meet. It was a doula date, and I think we had a few friends, mutual friends, and there was just like a lot of people in my life had been saying like, you need to meet Emily, and so I did, and I just remember a feeling of like, you validated a lot of things for me. I think that I had questions about, or that I was just like, isn't this kind of fucked up? Like
Right.
this doesn't seem right. And I remember just in our short, or however long we spent, like just feeling like less alone, or like, oh, I'm starting, some of the questions that I'm having, I'm not wrong to have these questions. And I had a few other interactions with other people, other doulas mostly. And I guess, and yeah, it's such a process. So it's really hard to pinpoint when exactly it was, and probably reading things. I'm a huge birth nerd, as birth workers tend to be. So I was also throughout, while I'm attending births, just reading everything, like devouring everything I can about birth, books, podcasts, everything, and, of all different kinds of viewpoints. And so I think that a combination of just like learning more and then this feeling that is deep in my bones that was really from, that first birth. But I think that goes back into maybe, I don't know, many, many lifetimes ago, something that I just knew inside my soul.
Right, you're a woman.
This feeling of like, this is not what birth it needs to be. Like, this is not, we're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And so I think, it was a slow process, but it was like very similar to the way that I put together that I was raped. Actually, it was like a puzzle. My therapist had me do this activity where she was an art therapist, and she gave me a blank puzzle and was like, just make these puzzle pieces into like however you want to fit into the puzzle of like, this happened to me. And so I had, I went back through like the decade of life experience post this traumatic incident happening to me, and kind of was able to see, it was a really cool activity because I was able to just make my own artwork, and it only made sense to me, and then put it together and was like, okay, I was raped. Like that was what that was. And so I think in a very similar way with birth, I had all these puzzle pieces, and it was like going through all the memories of things that I saw, questions that I had, talking to other people, and, reading work from like Sister Morningstar, different midwives, or just starting to learn like, oh, this isn't this. Yeah. Like I said, that this is not how birth has to be. And this is actually very wrong. And so, it was a process, but as I started to accept it, I guess, or really like get woke to it, I began meeting more people, and more people came into my life, and getting just more confident in what I was starting to see and understand. And so it helped a lot, like having other people to talk to that were like, oh yeah.
Well, because as we know, I mean, so many doulas, including ones who've been doing it for a very long time, are not vocal about how effed this whole thing is, and are not vocal about what they're seeing, and actually are quite committed to the reframing and the complacency and the being, this whole thing that, any doula is familiar with of like, yeah, it's not the best, but like someone should be with them. Which I find disgusting. I find that like way of thinking super, super harmful.
And I don't understand, to be honest, how people can do like hospital births for decades,
years,
and not feel traumatized by this.
They do. Of course they do.
They have to,
but I think we are experts at compartmentalizing and, like I just said, reframing and going like, well, at least somebody's with them. And, another very real thing that's a bit more practical is when you've built a business around this, you then, you have one of two choices. When you start to get woke to how unethical this is, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? You either have to not go there and not look at it and come up with some creative mental gymnastics of how to stay in the game, or, you know, you like you and I go, fuck this and ditch it, you know, which
And
is
get
not
out of
easy.
it.
It's way, way, way harder. I was making a lot of money attending women in captivity and accepting their money and watching them be brutalized. I was making a lot of money doing that. And it was not financially easy to stop doing that. As you already know, and obviously probably most people who listen to this, because it's not the first time I've said it, it just got to a point for me where it was like, I can't ignore this. I can't act like I'm actually making a difference. Because we're not.
And that was a scary part of my process in realizing I have to stop attending these births in captivity.
Right. Totally.
And how do I do that? Because again, like, it was a big part of my livelihood.
Totally. And your identity and your place
identity.
in community, and you were getting clients so easily. Like, I totally relate to that. And obviously it's like 95% of people are birthing in the hospital, and then a very tiny percent are birthing at home. And if you are going to attend home births, LA is a pretty darn good city for that, because there are quite a bit of home births. I mean, it's all relative, but you know, it's not like
a big city,
the middle of nowhere.
More people.
But it's still all with licensed midwives. So that's still, to some degree, very much a branch of captivity, obviously.
Yeah. And in my opinion, a lot of the midwives in Los Angeles are fairly conservative, or there's a lot of,
let's replace the word conservative with medical.
Maybe. Yeah. Okay. That's a better word.
Because that is what it is.
Yeah. Medical. Yeah. And, you know, and needing to protect their licensure.
Yeah. I mean, that's true everywhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's keep going then. Okay, so now you're deep in your birth work and your own self-awareness and healing of your own life stuff, and you're starting to really not be able to ignore what you are seeing. You and I have met at this point and have become friends. So now we're a couple years ago.
And I start to then get more vocal with clients, like more honest. I would say I started feeling comfortable. I started feeling comfortable deciding, like, you know what, there are certain hospitals where I just had so many traumatic experiences that I cannot attend birth there. Sure. And then feeling confident to kind of explain why, that's always that's a whole other conversation. But, you know, we're just saying no to certain births, or knowing that, like, setting my boundaries.
It shouldn't be a whole complicated conversation to say, I don't go to that hospital or I don't birth with that doctor because this is why. This is what I saw him do last week. This is what I saw him do a year ago. And I could never, in good conscience, you know, go with you into that birth and act like you're going to get what you want. Like, why is that feel as doulas so radical and so like dangerous?
It feels radical, and it feels so hard to, like, to tell people that, like, you know, you don't want to, like, hurt them. I don't know.
But then I always, what gave me the confidence to get over that. So for anyone listening that's resonating with this conversation, crinkle. Sorry. No, don't be. It's all good.
Saltines.
Yeah, exactly. What I remember thinking, because I was in an abusive relationship and then I got out of that, and then I remember another woman in my social community started dating said man, and I was like, someone has to tell her, like, whether it's me or someone else, someone has to tell her that he's dangerous. And it was also when I was attending a lot of births. And so I was like, wait, why is this any different? Why is this any different? Because actually, he didn't do nearly this kind of stuff to me that I'm seeing doctors do to women. And so why is there this veil of acceptance? I mean, obviously, we know why. It's the fucking patriarchy, and it's our socialization, and, you know, that we're meant to be silent and men can do anything, especially doctors, and our whole complete loyalty to the system. I mean, we actually know what it is. But I remember helping just really take it there in my own heart and go, you know, if there was a rapist in my community, I would not be silent about that. Absolutely not. And there have been rapists in our community, and I wasn't silent about it, or a woman abuser or whatever. And so I am unwavering willing to deal with whatever social backlash there could potentially be about that, and I have in the past. And so I just finally realized, like, why am I silencing this whole other pretty parallel situation?
Yeah.
And actually, it's even more unethical because I'm accepting money. And that these women have no idea. So anyway, I totally relate to that. And I think a lot of doulas do. It's weird how silenced we are willing to be.
Yeah. And it's weird how almost taboo it is to discuss it with other doulas too. Like I remember feeling like almost secretive as I started asking other doulas, like, so how much do you tell people? Like,
right.
like how honest are you with them? And so as I started to get more confident on it, one of the things that, is challenging is feeling like I would try to tell people everything that I knew, or, and I always tried to be respectful of them, but, many times they wouldn't listen to me.
Totally.
Or, you get a lot of the response of like, it's the authority of the doctor at the end of the day still like overrules everything else.
For many people.
Not with everybody, but,
right. And those aren't women that we want to serve anyway.
And that's kind of where I ended up landing. Though that was a difficult decision because I do have a little bit of bleeding heart syndrome.
Sure.
And like wanting to help everyone and it was a process to be able to realize like I can't help everyone.
And that's exactly it. Is I think many women, especially birth workers, relate to that and the whole like wanting to help, but actually, are we helping when we go with women who are with known predators? Like and if we've tried our best to say, hey, he's a predator, this is the deal, da 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 da. I have found more influence and more changing by saying he's a predator. This is why I don't attend births with him. And if you still choose to, of course, that's your prerogative, but these are my boundaries. And the firmer I got about that, because, and this is what's the most important thing, I am saying this, you are saying this from a true space of love and a true space of loyalty to women. Women are who we serve. We don't serve the system. We don't serve doctors. We don't serve men. We serve women and their babies and their partners, but we serve women. And so I really was able to lock into, and it's obviously only grown since, of to speak the truth and to have our own boundaries is actually the most loving thing we can do. And then what happens from there, oh my gosh, like how influential I've been able to become from speaking my truth and speaking out against all this bullshit. And
so powerful.
Right? And really, really, really centering women and serving women. And actually, I think we both could make the case that you're not serving women to accept their money and pretend like you can help avoid a bunch of shit and then go with them into a hospital with a known abuser and then feel terrible about it, right? And carry so much guilt. And I mean, how is that serving anything? I don't know. I'm sure there's another perspective to this, but I don't get it.
And that's ultimately why I decided that I couldn't do that anymore. That I just couldn't. And so right now what it looks like is not attending births at all. But that's kind of jumping ahead. But I was arriving to that place for a while, of just, I'm not helping and really in this way.
It's painful.
Really painful. And so getting, more vocal, learning how to be more confident in my voice, which was a really huge thing for me just as a person and a major way of growing that I had to really push myself. I'm sure you remember, but like I undercharged. Well, most doulas do. I remember you having a talk with me and being like, what are you doing? Charge more money. I remember like one phone call in particular, I was just like crying and you were like my therapist in that phone call, like, because it was just like, I'm like coming away like traumatized from these and like not making that much money.
And you can't and that's a whole other thing. You can't put a price to the secondary trauma.
And that's what you can't.
It's just, it gets way too weird, which is essentially what we were doing. Like, I charged a shit ton to go to the hospital because it fucked me up, you know, and because I obviously had a lot of experience, but really it was like, I can't justify going there for under X amount.
Yeah, especially because, you know, I once I started getting more solid with my self-care, I realized that what I had to do to process a birth became pretty complex. And it was like, and I need like, you know, time to myself, and I need to do all of these things. Like, I'm going to therapy and all these things. And so it was kind of a logistically like, well, I need more money because of how much I have to take care of myself.
Right. You don't have to do self-care after you go to an amazing normal birth. You're like, even if I have found that even if it's a long birth, even if I've totally didn't get my normal sleep, and, you know, of course that's very normal, especially with first-time mamas, I feel so great after a birth. I feel rejuvenated. I feel like full of energy.
That feeling that I described, feeling after my very first birth, you know, that's totally what it was. It was like, I was like, I could just like, I wanted to just be like on rooftops yelling to everyone how amazing women are. Like, it's just like, the female body is incredible, and I don't need to sleep ever because I'm like so excited about it.
Totally.
And, you know, and I did luckily get to attend a few more births like that, but honestly, over the births I attended over the years I did it wasn't that many that I felt that way after. So coming back to my journey, my husband, who's now my husband, he had been a friend of mine for a really long time. Actually, the partner that I mentioned that I had been with for 4 years, they were best friends. So there was a slight drama there. But it was a while before we got together. But anyways, when we started dating, we kind of accidentally fell in love, is what we say. Our first dance at our wedding was to fooled around and fell in love, because that's sort of what happened. It was kind of like, whoops, didn't mean to do this exactly, but here we are, and it was amazing. But he was just this incredible pillar of support for me that I hadn't had from a partner or even from a friend. Like, I was still, you know, having a hard time, you know, just feeling so deeply after births. And I would come home, and we moved pretty quickly in our relationship. We dated for 4 months, and then we had an agreement that we wanted to get married. So there was no, like, I was always so like, the proposal thing is so stupid and patriarchal. Like, I'm like, you don't need to ask me, or I don't need to wait for you to ask. Like, I just didn't like any of that idea. So we just like shook on it, basically. Like, we did like kind of
gentleman's handshake.
Like, let's do it.
You in? Okay.
Basically.
Totally. And that was like us too.
Yeah, and that was great. And then he moved into my studio apartment pretty shortly after, which you'd been into it. It was very small.
Really small.
And we lived there for well over a year. So I feel like it's a really solid start to a relationship.
Seriously.
So I'd come home from births or leave for births, you know, in the middle of the night. And there's no way for me to not wake him up because we're in one room. And I could walk in the door and he would wake up and he would just like pull me into, depending on the situation, but I could just like cry into his arms, and he would never complain about me waking him up, or he just did anything I needed him to do. Like, I remember one time just really having a really hard birth, and, you know, I hadn't eaten in a long time, and I was just like feeling horrible. And, he was like, go take a shower. And he'd been asleep because it was 4 a.m. And he just wakes up and he's like, go take a shower. I'm going to make you mac and cheese. And so he's just like making me mac and cheese, like waking up, and, you know, had to work and stuff the next day. And he just was so supportive. And I feel like having that kind of support really helps me to feel more confident and seeing that what I was doing to myself and not, you know, and helping that it wasn't healthy or sustainable or serving anyone, and how much it was hurting me. And so a lot of conversations and, you know, just having his support and yeah, he was just really, important part of me learning how to, I don't know, just in getting to where I was and learning how to take care of myself.
And so take me then from that into going back and forth of do I want a child or not? So you guys are now engaged, you're living together, you have this wonderful support. You and I have been friends now for a little while. And then when I left LA, I remember one of my last conversations with you was just you really not knowing. But you did know who you wanted to be with, and you had this wonderful person. I think your wedding was relatively close, but just not quite knowing yet. So take me into the conscious conception piece.
So we both were, I think, uncertain. Like I said, my previous relationship, I was like, nope, not having kids. So that's kind of what I'd been saying. And I'm a very I change my mind a lot about things in general in my life. And when I have an opinion, I'm like pretty strong about it. So, and I'm kind of extreme. Like an example is I used to be like, I hate little dogs. And I'm just like, I hate little dogs. That's who I am. I don't like little dogs. Well, I now own a 7-pound dog.
Wait, you got another dog?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I only know about your bigger dog.
She's a 7-pound Chihuahua Dachshund. So I changed my mind about things that I had strong opinions about. So, I was, and people in my life just kind of know they're like, that's just Kim sometimes. And that's just who I am. But so I would, a lot of people were like, oh, you don't want to have kids. Like, that's what you're saying. And then, I started to think like, well, if I was going to have kids, it would be with this person for sure. Right. And, he's so great at taking care of me. He would be so great at being a father. And, so we kind of started to talk about it. It was like a lot of little conversations, but even at the time of our wedding, there was no like decisions. He had always said like, probably not going to have kids. For him, there's a lot of like, he's really passionate about the environment, and he had thought a lot about like overpopulation and had always been like, well, maybe if I did, I would adopt. It just wasn't certain that he wanted to do that, or I don't know. But he also always said, never say never. That's like always been his mantra about the whole, like, will I have kids thing. It's like, well, I'll never say never to anything. So I remember, I don't know, at a certain point after our wedding, I think I started to feel like, oh, you know what? I do want to have kids. And then I suddenly was like, I want to have this man's baby. So I started to get a very intense baby fever, and was just like, oh man, I really want this. And so at first I was like a little nervous because he'd still sort of been like, I don't know. So we just started talking about it, and we talked a lot, and we had a lot of conversations over several months. We got married a year ago in August. So really after our wedding, I feel like I started to, it was after we got married. I was just like, and now I want to have your babies. So we talked a lot about like, okay, well, if we do it, it's still like a little ways away. But then like time keeps moving, and I'm just like feeling it more and more. And we're talking more about it. And then towards the end of last year, the conversations did.
And I do think I should point out here that it's interesting that this kicked in for you as you are stopping attending abusive birth.
Yeah.
Because that's got to be related. Like
Absolutely.
knowing that you're exiting this system and probably like separating out these things a little bit, I imagine would give a lot more room for safety and comfort in that.
So at this point I had really I was still attending births, but I was pretty firm with my boundary. I was like, like you said, I was really a lot more careful about who I was working with, and I was doing a lot fewer births too. That was an important thing for me. But so at that point I was mostly doing home births or a few hospital births, but very like only to the hospitals that I, felt like, okay, I'll go there. Anyways, so I'd shifted my birth work in some ways, a lot more boundaries. But I knew in my heart, like I was going to stop eventually, because it was just like, I can't keep, until, unless I'm like only attending free births or something, exactly. Which is just hard to do, but not impossible. But anyways, so the conversation, so those things were very parallel. So the conversation started to get a lot more serious. And then also around this time, I started to learn a lot more about fertility and about tracking my cycle. And I just got really interested in that. And I read like Taking Charge of Your Fertility. I was listening to your podcast a lot. I was just learning a lot more things about like, my body and I think tracking my cycle and getting really comfortable with that and like learning my body changed a lot for me too.
Yeah, me too.
So I, was starting to do that. And so then in like January of this last year, or towards the end of the year, I said, you know what, I had an IUD in at the time. And I was like, I don't want to have this IUD in anymore. And it was kind of in the decision of like, we were feeling like, yeah, we're going to have kids. We kind of arrived there, but it was still like probably a year away. And because he didn't feel ready and I felt like I probably was ready, though I knew I wasn't, and there was still a little more we had to do. But I told him, like, I reached this place, like, I don't want this thing in me anymore. I want to take it out. So I want to use fertility awareness method. And so we had discussions about that. He was like comfortable. We were both like on board. So I was tracking. And so in January I had the IUD removed, and that was like kind of a really empowering experience for me.
Hell yeah, totally.
To just be like, because the first time I wasn't in any kind of birth control. And
it's a big deal.
Yeah, and it felt very freeing. And I remember actually like I also was like getting into self-exam, so looking at my own cervix, and had found a really awesome group of people where we were doing that and learning about that with each other. And so I remember when I got my IUD out, I had asked to put the speculum in, and the doctor was like, huh? Like she was like so confused, and she was like, what? Like, and I was like, yeah, I like all the time. Like I look at my own cervix, and she was like, why would you do that? And I just was like, because I want to. Like,
why do you do it, lady?
Yeah.
Jeez.
I think I did do it. And, but it was just, it really left like a sour taste in my mouth.
Why didn't you have a midwife take it out?
I don't know. I think because I really wanted it like urgently, and I had Kaiser, and it was what I had to do. Yeah. Because I did think about having a midwife do it. I should have. But anyways, and she was just very like, and I mentioned like, yeah, I think, cause she's like, you can get pregnant now. I'm like, yes, I'm aware. But I did, so like, I also am using fertility awareness, meant like, I know
she's
what
like,
I'm
whatever,
doing.
dumb hippie.
Yeah, exactly. And she was just like, well, when you want to get pregnant, just start taking prenatal vitamins and have sex, and that's all it takes, or something like that. And I was just like, rolled my eyes, like, whatever, I'm done. And I remember walking out of the hospital and being like, I am not walking into a hospital again. I mean, I did still have some births I was committed to, but like for myself, until like, I get into like a serious car accident, like I need to, for like a life.
So at this point, wait, okay, so this was January of this year? Of 2018?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
2018.
So
like what year?
At this point, do you already know that whenever you get pregnant, you're going to have a wild pregnancy and free birth?
I kind of skipped over that. I was pretty certain, but I wouldn't say it was 100%. So once the conversation of having kids started, I was like, obviously I'm not giving birth in a hospital.
Right.
And so I was still kind of like maybe a midwife. And so I had a few specific midwives in mind that in LA that I thought maybe, and I did work with some of that, and it just, ended up afterwards deciding like, nope, actually I don't want that. But, so
we're so lucky, right? That we got to, we kind of get insider info.
Yeah,
we get to go to all these births and be like, oh, never mind.
Yeah. So I would say in January, I was still a little bit like, well, maybe I want a midwife. I remember thinking like, I kind of want to have a midwife that I can call if I want them to come, but like, maybe I won't want them to come.
Sure. It's understandable.
And I was not sure, but I did actually already know who I wanted to be my doula, which was my good friend, Stevie. And we had a really great connection, and I just thought like, I really trusted her, and I remember her and I like have the first time we ever talked about it, and I said, I'm going to give birth someday, and like, I want you there. And we both like had these images and visions of me giving birth, and it was really beautiful. And it was just very like, yes, of course I want you there. Like, I trust you, and I want your energy. So I felt very certain about that, but I wasn't certain about everything else. And then it didn't take long. It was just like a few more months, after I had my IUD out and I was tracking, And at that point, I didn't want to get pregnant, and it was working. I wasn't getting pregnant because I knew what was going on in my body, and I knew when we had to wrap it up or when to avoid having sex. That gave me a lot to be, because I think at first there was a little bit of like, does this really work?
Hell yeah.
Oh, yeah, it does.
Like, can I really trust myself?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally.
So that confidence definitely helped, or that definitely helped build my confidence. And then there was just a period of time. Again, it's like, it was also procedure or process oriented. I don't remember the exact moment, but I just remember it was like I was trying it on and saying like, I'm going to have a free birth. Yeah. And I should mention that actually your birth and your birth story and, and talking to you while you were pregnant and all was certainly like, watching a friend and a peer go through it and like see that she could do it definitely made me be like, oh, well, if Emily could do it, I think I could do it too.
Hell yeah.
And, and that definitely helped a lot. So, and that was happening, around the same time. So, not long after you gave birth, I think I did start saying to people like, I'm going to have a kid at some point and I'm going to have a free birth. And I remember like everything, just getting more confident. And the more I said it, the more I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to have a free birth, like, just feeling a lot stronger in it.
Like, I'm going to have a 6-pound dog and a free birth.
I changed my mind. And so I just started to really begin to own that. And I remember talking about it with Stevie, and Stevie was like so supportive. Stevie's very much a radical doula. And she was like, yes, of course. Like, you can do this. I love it. Like, just very, on board. And the other piece was when I started talking about that to Jacob, to my husband, he was like, yeah, all right. Like, we could do that. Why not? And, he was like,
good boy.
Yeah. And because he knew like
right.
he was very much like, well, you're not going to a hospital.
Yeah,
for sure.
exactly.
Because, like I said, he was the one like holding me while I was crying.
Exactly.
About watching women be ripped and things like that. And so he was always on board with like, well, definitely not a hospital. And he just, I remember watching him like he wasn't nervous about it. So that gave me more confidence too. Mm-hmm. We had a few conversations like discussing concerns, which, his concerns were the normal concerns that he'd had. He's just like, I just worry about something happening to you. And it's like, but we discussed like something could happen to me wherever I give birth. Like,
that's the thing, right? It's like this like notion that a midwife being present somehow takes away anyone having to face the reality of rare complications or the whole what if. Like, a midwife doesn't just all of a sudden make a birth so much
it's not
safer.
Magic.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
We had a lot of conversations about death and how that's a part of the process and really discussing like what our comfort levels were and just accepting that not all outcomes are positive but that doesn't necessarily, I don't know how to phrase this, but just our comfort with trusting processes and just because I'm in the hospital does not guarantee that a negative outcome isn't going to happen. And actually, in my opinion, it increases the risk of a negative outcome happening because of the various other traumas that could happen.
I mean, really, from your and I's perspective, I would say it actually guarantees a negative outcome. Yes, you are extremely likely to have a live baby because most babies do survive the birth process, but we know all the other things that are, not just likely, but they will occur if you're in the hospital.
And so kind of what I decided, and this also came into making the decision to have a wild pregnancy and not doing all the tests and all of that, was like, you know what, if there is something, like there's a chromosomal abnormality.
Okay, say it again. Chromosomal, you can say it.
Chromosomal abnormality. Got it. Or anything wrong. I'm going to trust that, like, if that's what was meant to happen, then I'm not going to get in the way of the process of that. It's going to happen. You know, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen either way. And whether or not I do a test or whether or not I give birth in a hospital isn't going to change that outcome.
And yeah, and I think right there, it really comes down to philosophy of life. And how you would respond to certain things, because I think the only really two reasons to try to gain all this information through industrialized, system is if you are going to terminate the pregnancy, or if you were of the perspective that you needed to be as prepared, air quotes, as possible for said thing. But of course, the irony of that is that there's so many false positives, and there's so many false positives of ultrasounds and even the blood tests. That's kind of interesting too, because like we know, because we walk with women, how many women are told, oh, your baby could have brain damage, your baby could have Downs, your baby could
stressful.
have, and then they're freaking stressed out, and then they have a totally average, or whatever the right word is, baby.
Just a baby.
So interesting.
Yeah. That was, I saw that happen a lot of times. And so that was one of the things I realized. And we talked about, and thinking about like the tests and stuff, I'm like, it doesn't help anything. And if anything, it just makes people stress more. And that's that's a negative thing to me. So yeah.
So you're 12 weeks.
So I'm 12 weeks pregnant. So let me speed through conscious conception, or once I got the IUD out, it was like, okay, I don't have IUD at some point, like we do want to get pregnant. So we set arbitrary dates for ourselves. At first it was like, let's start trying at the end of the year. And we had this idea to like do a trip, and maybe we would do it then. And then we kind of kept moving that up because it just felt like, you know what, actually maybe like we're getting closer. And then eventually we were like August of 2018, we're going to do it. We're just going to start. And so we planned like sort of how we wanted that to look like. But then come like June, we were like feeling, I don't know, I guess it was just like, we just started to feel more ready. So I guess it was the end of June, when the week that I was ovulating, we just decided like, let's just like let's just do it. Like, don't pull out this time. It was kind of, it was a little bit more than that, but we just, I think both of us just decided like, we want to do this. So we're diving in. Basically as we were getting closer. Oh, and another piece to it, the thing that had been really important to Jacob before deciding to have a family was getting a house. That was actually a really huge, important thing to him, was like, he wanted to buy a house. And so he, and I was like less on board with that because I actually thought that buying a house in LA was scarier than having a kid. Because it is. Houses are expensive. I was like, I am not scared of getting pregnant and having a kid.
Living in a studio with a kid and 2 dogs and your man might be a little scary too if you can avoid it.
But, I was really scared of that, so I was resisting it a little bit. But then we started to look at houses, and so it just got more comfortable. So right around the time that we started to look at houses, the conversation shifted to like, we're ready. We're ready to start calling in the baby. So what we decided to call the summer of love. So we're like, in the summer, it's going to be our summer of love. And it was really important to us that we enjoyed the process.
Yeah.
So I had been tracking, and we decided, you know what, like, let's not do that. Like, I just decided that I wasn't even going to like do any of my tracking anymore. We were just kind of like, I wasn't going to temp or anything because it was too stressful to me. We were just going to have sex when it felt right. And our rule was like, it had to be enjoyable. It couldn't be forced. And it had to be like, we were doing it because we wanted to. So,
and all of those things are just tools, right? because they give
Yeah.
us information. So if, let's say you had actually tried for 6 months and it wasn't happening, well, then you probably would have called in those tools again to really make sure you were hitting the right day. But I think
And
that's
that was
beautiful to just, you
totally.
started out super relaxed.
And
Not
that
that
was
it wouldn't be relaxed with those tools.
Yeah, but for me, like
But for you, yeah.
I'm much I like to control things, and that's sort of always been my comfort level, for better or for worse. And so it just really, we made the decision. The plan was, if I wasn't pregnant by the fall, then we'd start introducing, tracking again. Like I had kind of like a general outline, because I like plans of like. Yeah. Oh, and I should say that I had decided my last birth was going to be in August. And I actually had a birth scheduled for the end of August, a home birth. And then they decided a few months before that they wanted to go with a different doula, which had never happened to me ever.
And it's such a blessing.
And I remember they wrote me an email, and I remember reading that email and being like, I'm going to be pregnant by then. Like, that was what I thought, which I was. And so I just was like, okay, like, this is cool. Like, I'm not supposed to go to that birth. So I already had someone for early August, and my plan was, I'll try to get pregnant like early August, or around when I'm ovulating in August, so that it's not interfered. Because I felt pretty strong that I did not want to go to anyone's birth while I was pregnant.
Yeah, me too.
And that felt important to me. But then I guess it was early July rolled around, late June, whatever it was. And we just kind of decided for our summer of love to start there. And I thought in my head, I was like, it's going to take maybe 2 or 3 months. That's just sort of what I assumed. So I was pretty I felt good about it. And I had a trip planned to go visit one of my best friends in Tennessee. And I was saying that was my maiden voyage, because I was going to go on a trip by myself and, not be on call, and just like enjoy being with my friend out in the woods or on the farm. She lives on the farm, and she like poops outside, and she lives in a cabin and has this I think beautiful homestead life. So my plan was to do that in, when was that? End of July. So we have unprotected sex beginning of June. And the week after, I started thinking, I think I might have gotten pregnant. I just started thinking about it a lot. And, so I had all these plans. I was like, you know what? Let's go have like this big sushi dinner. And like, I'm going to get in a hot tub. I'm like going to do these things, or I'm like have my last few beers or whatever. Just things that I'm going to probably cut back on. I also, part of my conscious conception was I had changed my diet a lot. I had completely cut out alcohol and caffeine to that point, and cut way back on sugar. I just sort of had a feeling. And I remember so we had this big sushi dinner, and the night before I got a hotel room for myself the night before I went on my trip. And I just had this glorious day of laying in bed and reading a book all day, and masturbating, and just a very full, whatever Kim wants to do kind of day. And even
surprisingly, I just stayed in bed and made myself come all day. I had all these other plans. Hell yeah.
It was a great day. And
that's a me day right there.
At that point, I think I kind of knew. I just had a feeling that I might be pregnant. But I don't know. It was all a part of the plan. Was that's what I would have done anyways, even if I wasn't pregnant. But I the day that Jacob took me to my hotel, I remember being like, oh, I want to stop at Office Depot or something. I want to get a journal, because I want to start keeping a journal for the baby, because we're, at that point we knew that I could be pregnant. We officially started calling them in. So I found this adorable little giraffe journal, and I was like, I'm going to start now, on this trip, and I'm just going to write to them, and I just want to write to them about this journey and how it's going, or whatever I want to write. And so I got that, and I started writing to them that day. And I don't think I wrote about how I spent all day masturbating and lying in bed, but
dear child, today was a wonderful day. God, that's amazing.
But I think I did say, like, I kind of think that you might be in me now. I don't know, something like that. But and so those, like, it was like a week or two, where I was just kind of like, had this feeling, but didn't want to get too excited, I guess. But also I was just like, I just want to be in the moment and enjoy, like, day to day. And so I go and see my friend, and we had a great time, and we were like swimming naked in waterfalls, and
early pregnancy is cool because it is very just like, it is what it is. Mm-hmm. Like, you either are or you aren't. It just is.
Yeah. And I decided, and I wasn't going to get stressed about it. And I wasn't going to be like hard on myself. I don't know. It was just like, I'm just going to keep living my life because to this point, that's all I need to do. And actually,
for the rest of your life, that's all you have to do.
Yeah. Well, totally.
So did you wind up taking a test?
Not till I got back. But so I was feeling like, the only way I could describe it is like lots of pangs in my uterus. I describe it as like, it felt like constriction. It wasn't cramps. It wasn't painful, but I was feeling just like pokes and prods in my uterus during this time. And then I was like, interesting, and kind of like intrigued by it. And would tell, it's like texting Jacob, like, I'm feeling these things. And the other thing I was doing is, checking my cervix. Cause that was just a part of my fertility awareness, is like the cervical fluid, checking cervical fluid and the positioning of my cervix. So I was supposed to get my period while I was in Tennessee.
Okay.
Which maybe you remember, cause I remember texting you, like, I haven't gotten my period, but, and my plan was to bring my menstrual cup with me, on the trip, because we had conversations. I was like, I might be pregnant, but I might not be. And, and I don't want to get sad about it. Or if I do, I was okay with being sad about it. My plan was, if I did bleed, I was going to bleed into the earth, because I was, going to be in my friend's farm. And so I was planning to just, sit in the ground and bleed into the ground, and like, okay, we'll keep calling the baby in. But I forgot my menstrual cup, and we were driving to the airport, and I was like, I forgot it. And he's like, do you want to go get it? And I was like, no, it's okay. Like, I can figure it out. Or I'm just going to bleed into the earth anyways.
You're like, I'm sure she'll have mason jars.
Yeah, she'll have something. And kind of jumping around, but my previous cycle, before I got pregnant, I remember, like, while I was bleeding, I was just like really tired on a day, and I was laying in my bed, and I remember thinking, I had this very strong thought, this is your last time bleeding for a long time, so enjoy it. And I thought, I'm going to free bleed. So I had like 2 hours before I had to go wherever I was. So I just like laid in my bed on a towel and just bled, or just let myself like lay there. And it was just this thought that was like, this is the last bleed.
Cool.
And that was actually before, like, because when we decided to start calling the baby in, it was really like in the moment. So I still, at this point, we were still planning to wait till August, and it was not August. So yeah, it was all like, we were just slightly ahead of schedule. But it was kind of spur of the moment, which was perfect for us. So then I'm in Tennessee, and I'm having this great time, and I'm checking my cervix, and I'm realizing my cervix is not dropping, like usually when to bleed. And I have pretty short cycles, like they're like 20 or 24 days, which, by the way, I had been told was abnormal, and that it would possibly mean that I wouldn't get pregnant.
Of course, someone told you that. Yeah.
And it was like, but I'm like regular, and I'm healthy, and so anyways, don't believe those things. Nope. But, so it was just, I'm just noticing and sharing all the stuff with my friend, like my cervix is still really high and no blood. And so then, like, usually I get my period like the day before I think I'm going to get it. So that day passes, no blood. And then the next day, the day it was supposed to start Saturday, no blood. And then Sunday, no blood. And just like each day that passes, I'm like, oh, okay, like, I'm not bleeding, and this never happens. I always get it early. And then it came the day for me to go home. And I remember just like being very emotional that day. I was sad to say goodbye to my friend. We both cried. And then on the airplane, I was like there was a mom with a baby, and just that sight made me cry. And then when I got to the airport,
sounds like pregnancy.
and I started feeling tired. And, so at this point, my period had been missed, but I decided I wasn't going to take a test until I was with Jacob. And I was still like, I don't know, do I want to take one? But I wanted to be with him, even though my friend was like kind of dying. Like, she was like, should we go get a test?
I'm sure.
And I was like, no, I made this promise. But that day that he picked me up, and he knew everything that was going on. I called him when I got to the airport, and he wasn't there yet, or he was running late. And I just started bawling, which was like an extreme reaction. Like, I was like, you're not here. And I just like cried. I went into the bathroom in the airport and was just like crying. And then I was like, what is going on with me? Like, why am I crying so much?
Awesome.
It was very weird, but I was like, I am pregnant. Like, I just, and each day it was just like, I'm pregnant. Like, just accept it. And when he, finally picked me up, and he took one look at me and just hugged me, and he was like, I love you, and you're definitely pregnant.
Yeah. That's cute.
Because I was like crying. He's like, this isn't how you normally are. And then at that point I was like, well, like, I think we need to buy a test. I want to take one. And I insisted on buying 2 different kinds. I don't know. It just felt right in the moment. And I took one, or I was taking them, I think, while he was peeing, because it said in the box, like, it takes 2 to 3 minutes. And so he's like, do I have time to pee? And I was like, yeah. And he was peeing but it changed like immediately. Like, it was like, I peed on it, and then it was like instantly like the 2 lines. And I was like, I'm pregnant. I think I just shouted it out, and he was still peeing. He was like, why didn't you wait till I was done peeing?
He's like, dude, you waited all week, and then I'm actually here. That's funny.
But, we were in the studio apartment still, so.
Hold on, I have a clarifying question. If he was peeing, where were you? Don't you have to pee?
I peed into a glass, and then brought the glass into the other room and dipped it into the glass.
I'm like picturing you, Kim. I'm picturing you like over your sink in your kitchen.
Because I was worried that I wouldn't pee on it, or I don't know. I was just like, I'm going to dip it into a glass. So he's peeing while I'm like dipping a stick into a glass of my pee.
Beautiful.
In a studio apartment. It was very glamorous. And so then I was pregnant, and then he left town the next day. I had been out of town for a week. He left town the next day. And I was just suddenly like, oh, I'm pregnant. And I still didn't really believe it, and I don't know. And I was really tired, but I did believe it, but I didn't. Yeah. It's just like it's like all
suspension.
It's so heady, and it's just there's a lot of mind games. But
and I don't think those ever stop.
Yeah, well, they have not stopped yet.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, they didn't stop my whole pregnancy, and even now, like, it's still heady and somewhat can be like disassociative and super weird. My mom has 3 grown children, and she said she still looks at us and is like, are you guys really mine? Like, so
you came out of me.
Yeah, I think that's forever.
Yeah, I imagine. Well, I remember talking to you during your I remember when you were like, you had like a breakdown at 38 weeks, or I remember even just like afterwards, I remember you being like, I might not be pregnant. Maybe it's just, I think one time you told me, like, maybe I'm just growing like a
bag of goo.
Like
a bag of bones and goo. It's disgusting.
Like, okay.
I even had a name for it. I had a name for it in case it was a bag of bones and goo. Oh, yeah. It was the 36-week breakdown, and I was like, I for sure am not going to love this kid. I don't want to be a parent. What did I do? But that was like that was the most emotional, but otherwise I would just be like, I'm pretty sure I'm not pregnant. Like, the baby died, or the baby doesn't have a face, or it was just very like just being in that unknown is really what it is.
Yeah, it's such a necessary part of this process, I think. And and I'm very much in it right now, and and it's hard, but it's also kind of awesome. And I love that I haven't had any ultrasounds or anything, because this is mine. Exactly. Like, nobody else gets to see anything like about or hear my baby's heartbeat before I do, or anything like that, because like this is mine, and I will not let that go. And I will not let anyone take that autonomy away from me. And so even though it is like heady and weird, I actually like really love it's sort of the secrecy of it.
Privacy, intimacy, and that no one else is like validating anything for you, so that you don't get out of the work, that you have to just really be in it, and it is uncomfortable. And I'm not implying that there's not work with assisted pregnancies. Of course there is. Pregnancy,
there is,
exactly, it's life, it's everything. But there is a uniqueness to not having anyone else participate in or manage or validate, or like you said, listen or look in. There's a particular uniqueness of that work that
you
is
really
deep.
Just push deep into this, like trusting yourself
and the surrender, just what will
and surrendering
will
to
be,
it.
and not having, you don't get these little kind of shortcuts almost of, like outside reassurance, which is not bad. It's just a different way of doing it. So we got to wrap up here. So give me
rundown of my pregnancy so far?
Just like speak to this 12 weeks. We already know we're a couple weeks in now in the conversation of what we've already covered, because by the time you found out you were pregnant, you were already how many weeks?
Jacob left town, and then I started to get nauseous. Nausea started about like week 5, and it started first just nausea for a few days and not throwing up, and I was like, and I think like, I was just kept questioning. Like I took a few more pregnancy tests because I was like, I don't believe it. Even though I was like actually having a lot of symptoms, like pretty fast. My boobs got huge. They were really sore. Smells got crazy right away. And just very fast. And I started telling people pretty quickly. I didn't feel like I wasn't like really keeping it a secret or anything. And people seemed really surprised by that. Like when I would tell them, and they'd be like, "Oh, you're only 5 weeks." Like, and I was like, "Yeah, but I'm pregnant." Like, and if it stops, it stops.
Right.
But like, this is what it is for me right now. I'm pregnant. I don't know. I just think that's a weird thing that I don't know, that people feel like they have to keep it secret, and in case they miscarry. And I was always like, well, then I will tell everybody that too, because I'm going to be really sad.
Right. Well, that's it, right? Exactly. I mean, I think that's kind of the cardinal rule, is to only share with people that you would also share about a loss. And if you're telling people, if you're an open person who's telling people, and I do think obviously it's different when someone's experienced like multiple losses, or been trying for a really long time or whatever. There's so many other ways of experiencing this.
I don't want to minimize that for sure.
That feel really different. But anyway, so you were like telling people, starting to feel nauseous.
Yeah. And, and I was, again, also just still kind of shocked that like it happened the very first time that we were like,
I figured it would. Like, oh, shocker.
I still am. I still am like, I can't believe it. Part of me thought I wouldn't be pregnant yet, but and so then the nausea started, and then I just started vomiting. And I have been throwing up essentially every day, apart from a couple magical days, since like about the middle of week 5. And that has been hard.
Brutal.
It's been really brutal, and I have just had to change my life. Like I only can do what I have to do. Like I am working still. Like I'm babysitting right now a little bit. And that was one of the things. So when I decided to stop attending births, I was like, well, I'll do more like postpartum work and babysitting. So I'm kind of doing that. But right now just babysitting, keeping it simple, and teaching yoga. And I'm still doing it, but it's hard. I mean, everything is just like, I've had really intense food aversions. I've been eating really bland foods. And in this time, we also opened escrow in a house and closed escrow. So we bought a house. That started the week after we found out, or we took the pregnancy test. We opened escrow, and my husband was out of town a lot. And so it was just like so many crazy life just happening at once, which is maybe partially why I'm having such an intense physical, it's been just very physical. Ideally,
Ideally, we'd live in a world where a newly pregnant woman experiencing nausea could just like lay in bed and be taken care of for three months or whatever.
I can't.
Yeah.
You know, I am trying to do that on days when I can, but you know, it's not every day.
Does it feel like it's
hard.
shifting at all now at 12 weeks?
Well, I've had a few days. I haven't thrown up today, so that's positive. My appetite is starting to come back, so
Nice.
I've started to been able to eat vegetables again, which is nice because I really couldn't. So that was exciting. But the last few days I had some like really big vomiting days. Like yesterday, I threw up like 8 times, and the day before, and so
do you feel like you're able to stay hydrated?
Yeah, I'm still peeing, and you know, and I'm monitoring my weight, like just to make sure I'm not losing too much. I haven't really lost a lot.
But even if you were losing too much, like,
yeah, I mean,
what is too much? I mean,
yeah,
you'll be fine.
I just kind of like it. Just felt good to me to be like, am I like?
It's reassuring.
It's nothing too crazy is happening, and I think I'm staying hydrated enough because I'm still peeing. And
I know a lot of women who lose weight in their first trimester and then, and then gain it later when they're feeling better. And I also know women who have only been able to eat like waffles and potatoes for 4 months.
Yeah. You just do what you got to do.
Yeah.
And then, so a few people because a lot of people in my life know, or everyone pretty much knows that I'm doing this the way I'm doing it, that I don't have a doctor because people ask me and I'm like, no, I haven't. And me and family is supportive, but I have had, like, I think my in-laws are, they will sometimes be like, well, don't you feel like you want to go to a doctor because you're so sick? And I'm
what
just
would
like,
they
I
do?
know. Exactly. That's what I say is like, well, there is literally nothing that they can do for me. Like, they'll just tell me that it's normal, or, like if I am dehydrated, put me on an IV. I'm like, I don't feel like it hasn't gotten to that point. And that's what I'm like, if I was truly like passing out and like for real dangerously dehydrated, then sure, put me on an IV, but that's not happening.
You would go to get an IV. You wouldn't go to be like, doctor,
exactly,
blah, blah, blah.
And I've had that conversation with my doula that if it really did get that bad, that I'd want her to come with me. So, because I'm like, I do not want them to listen to the baby. I don't want, like, I basically just want to be like, put fluids in me. Don't,
honestly,
do anything.
I wouldn't even tell them you're pregnant.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably what I would do
if you weren't mention it. Yeah. If you could avoid it, because it would be this isn't going to happen to you, but if anyone is listening and they do find themselves in that position, like it's going to be a rare day that you can wrap your head around.
Just be like, I'm dehydrated.
Yeah, exactly.
Rehydrate me. But I would probably still have my doula come with me just in case. Like,
why not? And yeah, exactly. So, I think that's such a good point to highlight of this kind of knee-jerk reaction around, well, you don't feel good, or this is happening, so shouldn't you see a doctor? And it's like, well, let's just pause for a minute and really investigate what would happen if we went. I about my near drowning incident when I was like right around where you were. I think I was like 13 weeks, and I had my knee-jerk reaction was like, should I go make sure the baby's okay? And then I was like, hold up, what does that even mean? Who tells me if my baby's okay? Nobody can tell me if my baby's okay except for me. And even if I don't know, that's okay. And I really had to repeatedly throughout the pregnancy, as you will too, be like, hold up, what is actually available to me in these systems? And you and I have such the, we have the intel because we work in this field. So we actually know it's not that there's anything magical going on there that they can somehow tell. It's actually quite rudimentary and unreliable.
It is very unreliable. And they're, working so much with guessing and estimates.
Right.
And there's a lot of that. And people don't realize, like, so much of what they tell you is like they don't actually know either.
Right.
And that's,
of course not.
And that's,
they're not God.
Yeah. And one of the things that I'm so happy that I really understand about birth is that at the end of the day, there is so much we really just don't know. And nobody knows, and we're not meant to know. And so I think if you can kind of accept that and be at peace with it, then, like, you don't need to stress yourself out.
Well, and it's
I
not,
don't
it doesn't
know.
start and end with birth, right? Birth is not this like
Yeah.
this singular event. Like it's also life and death and how our
Yeah.
day is going to go. And it's just being in relationship with the divine, you know, like
Yeah.
it really is what it is. And if you can, or if you already are in relationship with the divine, whatever that means for you, you know, then your
Yeah.
whole experience is going to be colored by that.
It's true. And I didn't really talk about that at all, but that is a huge part of, I guess I mentioned like seeing psychics and things, but that my like spiritual practice and my personal spiritual practice or relationship with the divine, however you want to put it, is another huge piece of just who I am and how I've gotten to where I've gotten. And it's a lot of, yeah, it's the thing that I trust more than anything else.
Right. Totally.
And yeah. And when I decided really was like standing in the truth of I want a free birth, the real reason is because I know that the only true authority that like I want and like when I'm giving birth and even like right now, is my intuition and like just whatever, like what I trust and my body and the process, like the physiological process, that to me is the greatest authority. Like birth herself is the greatest authority there is on birth.
Right.
And I don't want anyone stepping in the way of that. And I know that, and you know, and that's ultimately why I chose not to go with a midwife. I think because, you know, that there's still an authority thing. You know, there's great midwives and wonderful
They're
people,
not allowed. They are literally not
Yeah.
allowed to let birth herself dictate the experience.
Yeah,
they agree to sabotage.
They have to, yeah.
Fuck
And
that.
I didn't want that.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that just comes from, yeah, again, like that's the only thing I really trust. I trust birth more than I trust any other humans. And I trust this process and that it will be what it will be, whatever the outcome will be. And so, you know, just reminding myself to sit with that every day. And being so sick really forces you to be in the present moment in like a way that nothing else does. Because when you're like literally trying to survive, like just being like, I mean, I've had so many moments of just like driving and being like, oh shit, I'm going to throw up on myself right now. You know, and there's just that's such a like very present moment. You can't do anything else. And it's, it sucks, like, cause it just sucks to throw up so much and it sucks to feel so crappy, but I'm really grateful for how much it's keeping me just like in this experience. And I, you know, there's something in that. So I'm just staying in the experience.
And then soon, you know, when we're gonna, you know, we're gonna check back in 3 months and then you're going to be being kept in this experience in a whole other way, you know? So it'll be,
we'll see what's shifting.
Yeah. So it'll be cool.
As much as it's hard these days to be like I have days where I'm like, it's never going away. I'm nauseous forever.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw up every day of my life. That's like how I feel. And it sometimes, you know, one thing that has been helpful is talking to other pregnant women. Because I teach prenatal yoga, I get to like interact with other pregnant women a lot, which just like in that basic, like just talking to another woman who's going through a similar experience is really nice. Like just that, you know, I've talked to the women that are like, yeah, this sucks. So like I'm puking a lot too, or, you know, just to be reminded that like, you're not alone. And
it normalizes it.
Yeah. And that helps me way more than a doctor could.
Right. Exactly.
You know, just being it normalized and having and feeling heard too, like feeling like my experience is being seen and heard for what it is. And I feel like pregnant women are really much better at doing that than other people, because a lot of other people will tell me like, it's going to get better, or, you know, or just things that aren't helpful. But when I talk to someone else who's been through it recently or is going through it, there's much more of a like, yeah, man, like it sucks.
It's brutal. Yeah.
And, you know, just kind of like, I see you and I hear you. And that's the thing that has been the most helpful for me these days, is just feeling like acknowledged for how hard this is. And like how it, like, it's a lot of work to grow a human. And I'm doing it again. Something's happening. I'm still feeling,
hopefully it's not a bag of goo.
hopefully not affect
Yeah,
you.
and this is just the beginning. It's just the first trimester.
And I'm feeling a lot of that construction feeling still. So I know there's like things, I feel pressure. And I had my hand on my belly the other day, and I felt like a ripple under my hand, and I was like, ooh, that was weird. And so, little things where it's just like something's occurring.
Something's definitely occurring. I'm pretty sure I know what it is. Okay, so we do have to wrap up because this was a super long episode. Okay, awesome. Well, let's leave it there, and thank you for your time. And this was awesome, and I'm excited.
Sorry, it was so long.
No, it's all good. I'm excited to, tune back in with you in another, let's say, 12 weeks or so, and see what's going on with you.
Awesome. Thanks for doing this. It's just like nice to get to share my experience.
I know. Plus, I miss you.
I miss you too.
That's it for today, everyone. Join us next week for another episode of the Free Birth Podcast. Thanks for joining us. And remember, your body, your choice. Lots of love.